Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody, please, to the panel for characters and conversations and dialogue. This is for FantasyCon 2015, and I would like to welcome Kim Caddy to our panel. Could you please tell us, Kim, a little bit about yourself and the books that you write and the genre that you write in?
Well, I am a writer of poetry, songs, and novels. I write in magical realism, which is cross-genre. Really, for me, I do paranormal. It's really not complete genre. And my current book, The Abbotsford Cat, is about interspecies communication.
Okay, it's very interesting. Angie, could you please tell us what genre you write in and the books that you are working on and what you write?
Well, I write mostly fantasy. It kind of tends toward like a dystopian feel. The story I'm working on right now it takes place in sort of a medieval setting, but it's very much a dystopian story. And it pretty much just follows two sisters as they're trying to survive their very war-torn world. That's pretty much, like, fantasy is pretty much my thing. I don't really do much in anything else. Yeah, that's pretty much it, fantasy.
Okay, cool. Lily, could you please tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I write predominantly paranormal and horror. I have done a couple of erotica shorts, but my debut novel was just released over the summer. It's called Stakeout, and it follows a detective from Chicago who, when he thinks he's following a human perp, finds out that he is a vampire and subsequently gets thrown into this entire paranormal community that he had no idea existed. And book 2 will be out in January.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, Mark, this is our last panelist. What would you like to tell us about yourself and the books that you are working on? Or that you
write? My name is Mark McQuillan. I write fantasy and dark fantasy mainly. My fantasy has the historically based from my personal experiences in the military and other people's experiences in the military. The first book is Valkyrie Darkness Awaits, where my hero, guy by the name of Gil Swanson, has a Valkyrie go find him. And the Valkyrie in my world are a little bit different than the Norse world. Instead of just going out of existence when the Norse started being Christianity, they just kept on choosing people. So now they have the warriors of the last 1,000 years or so. As part of the Warriors of Valhalla. And but anyway, that's basically this is the story. Valkyrie Darkness Awaits came out on October 15th. The second book will be out on December 12th. And the Smash Words edition of book 1 will be out. So I got all kinds of irons in the fire.
So everyone's working pretty hard then, it looks. A little bit about myself. I write under the pseudonym of Ellen May Franklin. I'm probably more described as a traditionalist fantasy writer. I series fantasy, epic fantasy, a little bit on the dark, and a bit of high fantasy as well. It's probably all mingled up. So I've got the Tarkini series out, and I've co-written with a UK writer by the name of Pete Emerson, the Unnamed Chronicles. And I'm currently working on different manuscripts for both of those two series. So that's us in a nutshell, people. We'd like to begin our topic, our talk on characters, conversations and dialogues, which is very, very important when you are writing any book. It doesn't matter what genre that you are facing. Dialogue is very important in our everyday world. In the way that we communicate with people, the way that we show emotion. We can still, even writing, we can still put forward body language that that couples up with dialogue on paper. So, Kim, could you tell me, what's your view on dialogue and bringing emotion to a story? Is that important with dialogue?
I believe that my dialogue moves the story, actually. I do a lot of, it's a little difficult only because the cats speak between themselves and they think to the people. So I have dialogue in a lot of different ways. There's a gypsy who has spells involved, and that is also through telecommunication. I mean, telekinesis, I'm sorry. And so I feel that dialogue in my story, without it, it would not be a complete story.
Okay. Lily, what's your views on using dialogue to thicken up a story or to layer it? What's the importance that you feel that dialogue has in a story between characters and the reader, obviously?
Yeah, I think the most important thing and what I really tried to convey the most is showing individuality. Because I can sit there and I can describe how they look, I can describe how they act and make them move, but I can't make the reader hear them. I can't unless they are speaking. And there are certain lines. I wanted to make it to where a character, you can recognize that character with just one sentence because they speak so distinctly, just like everyone you meet in the real world. So I think that's the most important thing, is to get your readers to recognize the characters and how they act and how they think through their dialogue.
Okay, that's a very good point. Angie, what's your view on conversations and dialogues? Do you think that that it is as important or more important as having prose? Do you think that it helps speed along the story, flavour up the story?
Well, I focus a lot on dialogue. I feel like a lot of my story actually ends up being dialogue, almost to the point that I was like, kind of concerned a little bit. I just gave my first book to my editor, and a lot of my story is dialogue, and so I'm hoping that it is not too much. But I really like to show a lot of body language. I think it definitely drives the story, and like Lily was saying, showing the different characters. Like I have different phrases and things that certain characters say that nobody else says, and it's kind of like a distinction to show that it's that character, and hopefully, you know, you wouldn't even have to really explain anything. Like you can see from how the character is talking, like what they're feeling. Once you start to know them a little bit, just the way that they word things. Like I have one girl that certain things she says, she only says it when she's irritated. And so, you know, when she says that, I don't even have to say that she's irritated because you just know because she's saying it.
Yeah, good point.
But yeah, I think it definitely drives the story along. I always read faster when I'm reading dialogue. So as a reader on that side of things, I feel like dialogue comes a lot easier sometimes than a lot of prose and description for me. So yeah. I really enjoy it. It's really fun.
Excellent. Mark, could you tell us, you obviously have quite a lot, busy books, and you've got a lot of characters in your books. How do you face up to writing dialogue and having a lot of characters talking?
Well, the thing about it is, I mean, they're very, very, the Valkyries and the rest of the world is very, very communal. I consider dialogue to be very, very important. I'd have to keep in my mind who's saying what, which is kind of hard at times. Yeah. Then I switch between modes of communication, sometimes mid-paragraph, just to keep everybody on their toes. Who's paying attention?
Yeah.
But I think I'm able to carry it off pretty well. I mean, I'm used to, you know, running games. I'm an old DM, so a lot of communication you get a lot of cross communication there too. But I mean, keeping it straight is the big challenge. Yes.
I have that problem myself. I have quite a lot of characters in my stories, and dialogue drives the stories a lot. And in particular, it's quite important, I think, that if you are writing dialogue, that you become very familiar with whatever language that your characters are using. So does anyone, Kim, do you ever find you have to do any research into a language or into a culture or custom of any factual race of people that we have on this planet, to incorporate into, to give you some knowledge about what you're going to write in dialogue with characters?
Yes, actually. Okay, I'm going to put you down. No, you can. Actually, my gypsy is Hungarian, so I had to do a lot of research into the Roma gypsy culture. And all my names, every single name in there that relates to the Roma gypsy culture is basically legitimate. I mean, they all come from the language.
So
Romanian or Hungarian.
So does this research help you when you are writing dialogue, so that in your head, I suppose, you would be picturing some form of accent and you would be trying to incorporate that into your dialogue?
Well, actually, that's a very interesting thing. When I was doing my readings with critique groups, I used some of the actual terms, like what catnip is called and such, in Hungarian, because the gypsy came from there. And they didn't understand it, so I changed things a little bit where I could explain without explaining. In other words, in the next sentence, like she would say the nipote, which I can't remember, nipote is catnip. And then in the next sentence, it talks about her putting putting her ingredients together to create the catnip, so they know what it was.
Okay. I'm just having a little bit of a think here. Quite often we can get lost with prose, this endless stream of description when we're writing books, and then we bring characters into our stories, and if they're arguing and whatnot, I have read that some people say that dialogue in a book is not real conversation. How do you feel about that, Angie? Do you feel that that's a credible statement to make?
I'm not really sure what you mean, like not real conversation.
Yeah, well, when we're having conversations in our head and when we're writing them down from character to character, I have read somewhere that people say that it's not quite reality, that we don't portray, that books don't portray dialogue the way that we would speak it. How do you feel about that?
I think it really depends on the story. I've read books where the dialogue is very stiff and they word things in a way that it's like nobody talks like that at all.
Yes.
And then I've also, I've read other books where the dialogue is just perfect, like it's spot on. It sounds realistic. It conveys what it's trying to convey. Like it's not a lot of filler, and I think it really just depends.
So this is why it's so important. Yeah. To make sure that the reader understands that understands your characters. So then dialogue also helps, doesn't it? I suppose, Mark, to how do I just put it, to just to give the reader the emotional feeling of your characters' habits and their personalities. That's incredibly important with dialogue, to keep that flow of the story. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very much dialogue driven. I'm a little bit outside the norm as far as that goes. I mean, I think dialogue is very, very important. I've had several issues with some people that did some of my beta reads for the first book, saying this is not how people talk. I said, yes, it is. Especially some of the UK folks I had read it. They said, nobody talks like this. I said, Americans do. I mean, and it depends on where the person is from in the world. Okay. Reading the book, whether or not this is conversational or not. Okay.
Very true.
So I try to keep that in mind so I don't confuse everybody.
Okay. So sorry, go on.
Go on. Go ahead.
You just raised that point, because we all are now so connected in the world through technology and always through books, is it important, do you think, that dialogue has to be able to be suited for everybody? I mean, if we just write, like, I'm an Australian, so if I just start throwing in a lot of Australian slang, or if I start using Australian or English grammar, it kind of it throws America out, or it may throw the European reader out. How important is it to have dialogue that suits everybody?
Well, I try to scale it to the least common denominator. I mean, in the English-speaking word, basically all the words are the same. It's the grouping together of words that I found that are a little bit, different between countries. I mean, I've lived all over the world, so I basically understand the concept of, different speech and that kind of thing. So I mean, like I said, I keep it down to the least common denominator that I'm not gonna confuse everybody.
Fair enough. Lily, can I ask you a question? Is
Sure.
there too much dialogue in a story? Can there be too much dialogue, do you think?
There can be. I think there should be a very even minimum, possibly a bit more prose, because too much dialogue will almost read like a screenplay then. And that's not what you want. You want people to get an even amount of action, prose, and explanation, as well as a conversation. But I think that every chapter should have at least 40% dialogue to make you get inside the characters' minds a bit more.
Yes.
Because obviously not every story has mainly only one POV, one point of view.
Yes.
I try and switch it up as much as possible. Sometimes some of the readers didn't like that, some did, because I want them to be in their heads, and what better way to know a character than to listen to them?
Exactly. Angie, do you have anyone that has an accent? How do you handle that side of things in dialogue?
I actually don't yet. I had considered, I don't really base my story on anything, but I have different races, and I considered having one of those races have an accent. I'm just not sure how to describe it, because it's basically what I was thinking is sort of like a Russian accent, but Russia does not exist in my world, and so trying to explain a Russian accent without saying Russian, I don't know how to do that. But I do have different nations and stuff, and mostly my focus right now is just giving them different things to say, like different phrases that are native to their nation. But besides that, I really don't have any accents.
Okay. So. Okay, Kim, do you have any characters that have an accent? Do you make a point of expressing that in dialogue so that the reader can actually see the difference between just normal speaking and someone that has an accent, so that they can make that distinction?
Well, I did. In the very first chapter, it's not an accent, it's a dialect. And this man or this boy is rural, and his speaking is a bit truncated. So he says, yeah, girl, stuff like that. And I made sure that was seen. Every character I have, whatever their personality and who they are and what they are to the story, I try to be as true to the character as I can with my dialogue.
Okay. Mark, is there too much italics, or can there be too much italics in a story if you have people who are using thought for dialogue?
Yeah, there can. In a way, you have to keep an eye on it. Okay, I try to keep it down to a minimum only when it's necessary in certain situations. I mean, there can be too many. I've caught myself putting too many in there, especially in the first book where I was trying to fly in by the seat of my pants, and I really didn't have an idea of what was going on because it was my first book. I mean, I've caught myself even in the second book doing the same thing. So, yeah, you have to watch it. I mean, it depends on what the characters are doing. Okay, are they in the middle of a fight? Are they trying to communicate in a fight situation? Or are they just trying to communicate privately, or that kind of thing? I mean, there's certain criteria that I use as far as the way I set up the scene to actually have the dialogue come out.
Okay, that makes sense. I have characters also like I have, because I have gods that pop in and out sometimes in the series, and so I often use italics, for their speech, just to separate the normal speaking in the world back into perhaps God speaking. And yes, it can be a bit tricky if you don't keep your eye on the italics. You can sometimes get it a little bit confusing, and it can sometimes be a little bit too much. Lily, what do you think of using dialogue as a show, like a show and tell?
It depends on the topic. Some things definitely should not be put about in dialogue, but there are certain things, like there was a long explanation one of my characters had to give about the paranormal community. Okay, this is what these things do, this is how you kill them, and it did have to be done spoken in dialogue. There was no way to put it into the prose. But there are certain things that should never be spoken, never be done in dialogue, and it really does vary depending on what type of book you're writing. I mean, in fantasy, I think the one thing, and in paranormal and anything like this, descriptions and actions shouldn't be talked about. They should be put into prose. Nothing that's so fantastical and so different or not natural should ever be described in dialogue. It should always be put into the prose to make the reader really see it.
Yeah, it helps draw the reader into the fabric of the story, doesn't it? With prose, and then
Yes.
the dialogue's a little bit like icing on a cake, I suppose. It just really finishes it all off. I'm just going to give everybody a few minutes, each of you, just to give a general talk about your feelings on dialogue, the importance of dialogue, about perhaps what you don't like in writing dialogue, or what you do write. So we'll start off with Kim. Kim, what are your thoughts overall on character dialogue and conversation?
Dialogue is part of the story. I mean, you can't go without dialogue. And I'm not a person who puts, mine is about a 40%, 60 as Lily was talking. I do write prose. I like writing prose. My italics can be thoughts. Communication in the book is body language, as Angie mentioned. And honestly, with interspecies type communication, it's a little more difficult, but I've had readers read the book, and it's gotten 5 stars on Amazon, so I'm happy about that. But right now, they understand the way these are intercommunicating. I don't know what I'm trying actually to say. I'm getting a little mixed up. What I say is that dialogue moves the story. Prose helps build the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Angie, what are your thoughts on the difficulties of writing dialogue, the importance of dialogue? Perhaps, I don't know, any other thoughts that you may have in regards to this topic for today?
I use dialogue a lot for character development, and I like seeing that when you can see different characters interacting. I have two point of view characters, and they're sisters, and one is a rebel and one is not. And so one of the things I've really enjoyed doing is showing each of these girls interacting with the same people, and they have completely different impressions of them. Yeah. I have one guy that the rebel girl is not like at all, and he just comes off as a jerk to her all the time. She thinks that he is a very bad person, and then to her sister, he's completely different. And so you can see just like it's a lot of the body language, but a lot of it comes through in dialogue, and just a lot of the attitudes. I don't know, I kind of just I feel like I just put my characters in a room and let them interact, and I just kind of follow them around and just let them do their thing. When I first started this story, I tried to make it sound more medieval, using more proper language, and my characters decided that that is not how they talk. And so it just kind of happens. And I don't know, it's really fun to write. I just kind of let them do their thing.
It's very important like that, isn't it? As I said, I work with many characters, and it doesn't matter how many people or beings or creatures I seem to, and whether they're good or whether they're bad, each of them has a very, very distinct personality. And I tried really, really hard through dialogue to express that in such a way that I'm hoping that when the readers pick up the book, that they can either love the character or hate the character. And if I've done my job as a writer, those characters which I need to be hated will shine like that through dialogue, through the way that I make themselves express themselves. And I'm just hoping that I do a good job as a writer like that. Mark, what do you think about dialogue?
Well, dialogue to me is very, very important. I mean, we spend all our lives talking to people. I mean, it's a natural form of communication for the human race, since it's crawled out of the primordial goo, to use a phrase for my book. I mean, I was in the customer service business for a lot of years, so I talked on the phone for a living.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't have a story without dialogue. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it gets really boring reading 200 pages of somebody just writing. Okay, because I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea where they are. Okay, if it's bad or good or whatever. I mean, in my books, basically the characters will let you know what they're feeling, what's going on, if they're pissed off or not, if somebody's going to die rather messily. I mean, it runs the whole gamut of things. And my evil characters have a tendency to be really evil. They delight in being evil.
Yeah.
Mine too. And he tell you about it.
Mine too. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of a thing where I have a scene in book 1 where actually it's book 2, beginning of book 2, where Loki is saying, "Okay, who are these people? What are they doing?" and you see he has a dialogue with himself, and you get to see inside of Loki's mind, how his mind works. It's kind of a scary thing.
And that's actually very, very important, isn't it? When you are creating a character from thin air, that you build them up in layers, and you can use dialogue to actually build that personality up as the story progresses. How do you feel about that, Lily?
That's exactly what I had done. When I started writing Stakeout, all I had was the opening prologue, the opening scene where I knew that Danny was a Chicago cop. I knew how he acted. I knew how he would speak immediately. I grew up in Chicago. I'm a Chicago Italian, so I felt very close to the character. When I introduced and created Angelica, my other main character, I didn't know her. And while I was writing her, through her dialogue, I got to discover her just as the reader is. Her personality, her past, her secrets, they all built up. And as she was speaking, you could slowly see. And in chapter 7 in Stakeout, there's this particular turning point with her where a secret is revealed, and you can tell, and I make Danny comment on it, in the previous chapter to the next one, her dialogue changes. The way she speaks, the way she even looks at him changes. And it's a very major part to know this character, to know how all of a sudden she had to, even her way of speaking was different. And that happens with a couple other characters as well.
So we can all safely say that without dialogue, it would be a very, very boring book, wouldn't it? We just we just wouldn't be reading it. Do we think, as a panel of people, that our personal lives, whether it's our home life, the connections that we have with the real people in the world as a writer, actually affects the way that we use dialogue or the way that we perceive dialogue in our stories? What do you think, Kim?
Well, this is a very good question, because my entire book is based on real people, real cats, and a real situation, even though my flight of fantasy went beyond the realities. But yes, these are all characters that I know.
Okay. Angie, do you ever use real people in your books and then use dialogue or to just to upload into your characters, or do you start from scratch with that? And also, does your life experiences or your lifestyle, does that have an influence in the way that you approach dialogue?
My life definitely has an influence in how I approach dialogue and just my story in general. I'm very big on redemption, and so there's always like that thread through there, and that kind of comes out in my characters. Like I kind of give them each their own motivations and desires, and a lot of them are passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, like just because of the world that they're in. And so like there's some things that I say or that my friends say that I kind of have put into my characters as just little like inside things. I also like using inside jokes in a way. Like when characters are friends, I feel like they should have this understanding between them. And so there's a lot of times where I don't really explain what they're talking about, but you can tell that they know what they're talking about. And I kind of pull that from real life too, just like watching people interact. I don't base characters on anybody that I know in real life, but I do sometimes pull like character traits. My one girl, I kind of look at her a little bit as my sister, but I mean, I'm not like copying my sister's personality. I'm just like taking some things from her. It's like, okay, you know, what would my sister do in this situation?
Yeah,
being this personality that she has, as opposed to my personality, which is a bit different than hers. So just it's a lot of just different personalities, and just watching people and how they interact, and how people who've dealt with certain pain and things, how they respond and how they act around people. And so it all just kind of comes together.
It's fantastic. So. Do you, Mark, find that perhaps some of your characters may be fractured parts of yourself as a physical person?
Yeah, a lot of them are. Like I said, most of it's written from inside my head, and I've taken some parts of people's personalities that I've known over the years. As far as my main character, that's me. I mean, I'm always the one that's interjecting myself into stories. So now I have a story I can be me in and don't have to do the interjecting, you know. I mean, I think all fantasy and people in general do that with whatever book that they're in. It goes back to, what if I was in this situation? What would I do? And I mean, and it's basically, that's the way the dialogue is all driven too. I mean, as far as just going out there and communicating with each other.
Yeah, yeah. Lily, do you find that you that sometimes if you're out and about that you may be listening into strangers' conversations, or find yourself studying people just so that you can get these little telltale signs, or that maybe you might pick up the odd phrase that makes you laugh, or that you think, oh, I'm going to have to put this into my phone, what these people said, because this is just going to be great in my book?
I do that frequently. A lot of the time, and I guess this really isn't such a nice thing to do, a lot of the minor people become victims. Yeah. I'll even look at neighborhoods and houses. I remember I was on the bus while I was writing Stake Out, the first book, and I passed through this neighborhood, and it was later at night, and it was a really fancy neighborhood, but there was a family outside playing with a big dog. And in the book, that turned into the father got eaten by a werewolf. So, but I will look.
Yeah. Thank you.
I will look for little traits and little things, because some of my victims are minor. I remember I was watching on the news the other day, and there was a female cop who was just talking. I'm thinking to myself, oh, you'd be a good idea to have a message carved into your stomach by an evil witch who wants to send a message. I mean, it's terrible, but that's what I do. I like to torture random strangers.
Okay.
I do the same. I kind of, I like to build up characters sometimes, and even favourite characters that I may have, and people in stories that I love, and I love their personality. I love the way that they speak. I love their position in the story, and then sometimes I will just have to knock them off, and it's just the way it has to go. Someone has to die sometimes, and I think
exactly.
And I think it's better having one of the favourite characters die, because I think that brings a higher emotion to the story and to readers. I often get cursed, but that's just the way it rolls. Yeah, I'm a bit evil. Okay, we've been speaking, everybody, now for close on about 40 minutes. Just to round off this panel and topic, is there anything anyone would really like to say that I've not touched base on in regards to conversation and dialogue with characters in our books?
I don't really have anything.
Nah,
I'm good.
Well, just keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Just keep
Mark?
it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I was, you had touched on it a bit earlier with accents and having to research an accent. In my story, there's a Chicago Italian. If you ever heard a Chicago accent, I'm trying to cover mine up right now. It's very distinct.
Yes.
And I had to write that. There's a girl who had to change her accent from British to American, so she talks different. There's a man from Britain from the 1700s, so he still speaks as though it's the 19th century or the 18th century. And then there's also an Irish woman with an Irish accent, so I had to go through, and I love anything that has to do with Britain and Ireland and Europe. I love that stuff. So putting their accents in and having a character speak in a certain dialect is just such a wonderful way for a reader to get to know the character. And as a writer, I can say it's so much fun.
I'm a little bit the same. I have characters in the Tarquinia series that's a blending of animal and human. And there's 3 to 4 ferret men, I call them, because they're a blending of ferrets and human, and they have a very thick Cockney accent, and I absolutely love them. I love them. They're called Ferret 1, Ferret 2, Ferret 3, Ferret 4. They don't have names because they come from.
What are we doing now, Luke? We have no idea.
Yeah. So they run around with a very toffee rat man who's a smuggler called Mr. Sniff. So he has this very, very toffee English accent, but then his cherry fellows, as he likes to call them, they've got these very, very deep Cockney accents. And I find it such fun to portray an accent that I don't particularly have, but you do have to make sure that throughout that story, that particular accent, if you're going to give a character dialogue that has an accent, that it flows from beginning to end, that it remains that way, so that the reader is never confused with having to read accents.
Yeah, well, mine are mostly Irish accents and Welsh accents. Mm-hmm. Norwegian, of course. There's some that you ask about different languages. I come from the Tolkien world, so there's more languages than you ever want to imagine.
Yes. So do I.
Yeah, so it's like it's sort of a thing where you have to go with what works at the time.
Exactly.
I'm originally from Chicago, so I know what she's talking about as far as the Chicago accent. I don't think I've ever lost mine, so I'm not even.
No, you haven't. I was actually going to ask if you've ever been there. I can hear it.
In Joliet. I went to high school. I lived in Joliet, Illinois, 50 miles south of Chicago.
It's very difficult being an Australian writer, because in Australia, our local language is full of slang. Australians love to take a word, any word. We will make fun of this word. We will use this word and it will have a different meaning. We will banter it around. And for us, there are so many words out there that are spoken that we don't think twice on. Sometimes I'll find that I'm writing a story and I'll look up and I'll say to someone's in the room, "There's such a word as this, isn't there?" And they go, "No." And I mean, no, there is a word like that, isn't there? I can say that. No, you can't say that. There's no such word. In your world, maybe. Is it Australian? Maybe. No. So I have to be very careful about the native language problem that I have as an Australian writer. Yeah.
I had the same thing because we spoke a lot of Italian. I'm not fluent, but we spoke a lot of Italian in my house. And there are some phrases that I always go to use. It's like, number one, I can't even spell that even though I speak it. And number two, no one's going to know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
And that it is a big problem.
Exactly. Kim, do you have any... Kim, do you have any last thoughts on dialogue and conversation? Anything you would like to share?
Well, listening to everybody else, I do. One part that's very, what I need, a climax in my books, was a spell, and the spell comes in twice. And to build a spell is going to take a lot for people in fantasy. Because when you're reading a spell, it has to build inside the reader. It has to mean something, and that's dialogue. My spells are dialogue. So that is one thing I had to work and work, because it's short. It's a short spell, but it has to move that whole scene.
And it has to have power behind it.
It has to be true. Your dialogue has to be true to your character. Not simple or complicated or anything, whatever the character is.
Oh, fair enough. Well, everybody, I think this just about wraps up our discussion today for character conversations and dialogues. I would like to thank everybody for joining me here. And I'm hoping that FantasyCon 2015 rocks and we go viral. What more can I say, guys? We need to go viral. And yes, we are all superstars because we're now out there on YouTube.
Oh, Lord.
So, there you go. There's no going back. I'm about to hit the stop recording in a minute, but I'd just like everyone to say goodbye. So, Kim, if you'd like to say goodbye to the readers and watchers of our recording.
Well, goodbye. I hope that people who enjoy animals and fantasy will look at the Abbotsford cats.
Fantastic. Angie, a farewell from you.
Bye. It was fun. I didn't throw up, so that's good.
Okay. Lily.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for joining. I hope you weren't too turned off by my saying that I like to torture random strangers. And we'll give my books and everyone else's here a good peek on Amazon. Bye-bye.
And Mark.
Goodbye, everybody. Read the books. Everybody's books.
Yes.
Spend that money. We're all poor. That's why we're sitting here.
Exactly. Everybody look us up. Don't look up Carol March. You don't want to know what you'll find there. Ellen May Franklin. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely day.